And I saw in your bio that you are that your adventurers and travelers. I was thinking, oh, we need to compare notes because myself and well, now my spouse, used to be with Kadinks, but we're big travelers and going to the Philippines in October to dive.
That's
and
exciting.
to Montreal and Quebec City for Christmas.
Ooh, how fun. Yeah, we went, my husband and I went to Canada for our honeymoon. And we did like a cross Canadian adventure. So we didn't go to Quebec, we didn't get there, but we ended in Montreal. And
Beautiful.
it was lovely. And COVID's kind of slowed us down a little bit, but I have a fun girls trip in October. We're going to Turks and Caicos, and I've never been there before, so I'm excited.
As you should be.
Someone just asked about, I think they just asked if they're, yeah, there we go.
Oh, they're off by default. Our guy's on top of it. Raymond. Everybody should have a Raymond.
It's very helpful.
Yeah, but so I don't know if we just jump on when we're.
I think we can just start whenever we are ready. It looks like the participant list, you can see it kind of increasing, and I think we're probably have everybody in now. Oh wait, it might have just gone up. Oh yeah, it's still going up.
Folks, if you can hear me, this is Margot Keener with Metro Outreach Court Program, and we're going to give just a couple more minutes for people to jump on the webinar. While we're waiting, would you please put your name and contact info and whatever program or agency or business that you may be associated with in the chat, or you can email me that info directly if you care to. I'm going to put my info in there in just a bit. So where are we here? All right. Well, we have a lot to talk about today, so I'm going to get us started. For those who didn't hear, I'm Margot Keener, and I manage Outreach Court, formerly known as Homeless Court, for Bernalillo County Metropolitan Court. For those of you not familiar with Outreach Court, we offer the specialized court for those who are homeless or facing housing insecurity, and provide an opportunity to take care of traffic and criminal misdemeanor cases outside of court through engagement with a community service provider of their choice. If you would like to learn more about Outreach Court, please drop me a line or simply Google Outreach Court to learn more about this program. As part of Outreach Court program, Chief Judge Marie Dominguez, representative of the DA and public defender's offices, and our community liaisons and myself are all about disseminating information and resources to empower people in taking control of their lives. And so towards that end, I want to thank you for joining us for this session of our webinar series called Clean Slate, Expungement of New Mexico Criminal Records. Before I begin, to introduce our special speaker, if you didn't hear me and haven't already done it, please put your name and contact info in the chat. And I promise not to harass you, but we'd like to know who's listening. Also, we are expecting a fairly robust question and answer session. And so in order to try and get to everybody's questions, we're going to ask you to drop them in the Q&A box. I will monitor questions and may from time to time interject with one of your questions, but most likely we'll hold them until the end, and hopefully we will get through most of them. If we don't and we run out of time, Asia and I will follow up with an email getting additional key information out there. So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Asia Brooks. She is a remarkable person. She's a native New Mexican, and she was born in Hobbs. She attended Wake Forest University, where she received a BA in English and Spanish. And she graduated from our New Mexico School of Law in 2008. She was a public defender for 5.5 years in both the felony and misdemeanor divisions. And she now is the director of the Second Judicial Court's Center for Self-Help and Dispute Resolution. She helped create the court forms and instructions that are used throughout the state in terms of the handling and processing of expungements. So she knows what she's talking about today. She also serves on the board of bar commissioners, the Committee on Diversity in the Legal Profession, and the Bridge the Gap Mentorship Program. And she is president of the New Mexico Black Lawyers Association, and past president of the New Mexico State Bar Foundation, and is the current secretary of Region 10 for the National Bar Association. So without further ado, I give you Ms. Brooks, and put your questions in the box. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Margot, for inviting me to speak this afternoon, and for that lovely introduction. I want to just clarify, so there were actually 2 rounds of expungement forms, and so when the law went into place, the Supreme Court had not come out with any Supreme Court approved forms, so I helped with that first round, and then the Supreme Court created the Supreme Court approved forms. So I want to make sure that that's clear. They did the heavy lifting when they created those forms. Fine, and our staff attorneys here at the district court, and I'm sure other staff attorneys around the state really helped with those first round of forms as well. So I want to give a shout out to them. I want to start out by mentioning something that you sent, I believe, in the email reminder. I'm going to share my screen briefly because I want to make sure that I give folks this resource right off the bat, because it's a very unique opportunity to get assistance with expungement. I think you can see that. Hopefully everyone can see. It's a copy of the flyer for the free statewide expungement teleclinic that New Mexico Legal Aid's Volunteer Attorney Program is going to be holding on August the 18th. There's still a couple of days of registration. Registration is open until the 31st of July. And so I do encourage folks, if you know someone who needs to get an expungement, thinks that they want to get an expungement, have them try and register for the teleclinic. Now, the individual will have to qualify for assistance through New Mexico Legal Aid. And so that's part of, the qualification that they'll do with people. But even if people don't know if they're qualified, they can contact the volunteer attorney program via the information there in order to see if they're going to be able to attend that teleclinic. And so that's not something that happens every day. And so I just want to make sure that we are promoting that and letting people know that there's something coming up very soon where you can get individualized legal advice from attorneys, from pro bono attorneys who are volunteering. And so, a lot of times people at the court, people like me, who work for the court, are restricted on giving legal advice to people. But at a teleclinic such as this, the attorneys who are volunteering are able to provide legal advice. And so this is a very unique opportunity that I just want to make sure that I highlight. So I think that stopped the sharing. And I just want to mention that before I start, the expungement process is very detailed. And I mentioned that the Supreme Court has Supreme Court approved forms that are mandatory for the process. So we are very excited about that because it gives some clarity to what people need to do when they're going through an expungement. And I will actually show on the court's website where those forms can be found. But I do want to acknowledge that we do have a very detailed process. And so I'm going to give a lot of information. I hope it's not overwhelming, but if you need any more information, I'll make sure and put my contact information up at the end so you can contact me if you have any specific questions. So I want to start off by explaining what expungement is. And so in New Mexico, expungement basically removes a criminal charge from public view, from public records. Criminal record expungement in New Mexico is governed by a law. It's section 29-3A-1. There's actually a really great resource called New Mexico One Source, where you can look up any New Mexico rules, statutes, laws, case law, things like that for free. And so you just put New Mexico One Source into your browser and you can look up the Criminal Record Expungement Act, which, like I said, it starts with 29-3A-1. And so expungement's very particular. It speaks to the removing of access to the general public of certain things. It can be a notation of arrest. It can be a complaint, an indictment, an information, a plea of guilty, a conviction, an acquittal, dismissal. There's all sorts of things that fall under the Criminal Record Expungement Act. And so it includes records posted on publicly accessible court, corrections, or law enforcement websites. Why would someone want to get their record expunged? They might want their record expunged so that they can answer no when they've been asked if they've ever been arrested or convicted of a crime. They might want to get their record expunged for identity theft purposes. Maybe their identity was stolen by someone and that person used their identity in different crimes that they got. And so they want to be able to get that off their record, right? But I do want to give like a little caveat about this. So even if you get your record expunged, there are certain things that that are still maintained. Certain records of the district attorney's office, of the federal government, and certain entities. So like CYFD, the Public Education Department, Human Services Division, certain employers may be requiring a security clearance, might still have access to those records. So it's from the general public view. It does have that exception though to the rule.
Yes, Raymond?
So the other thing is that, you know, I think if someone is thinking about getting their record expunged and they might have immigration sorts of consequences or any sort of immigration situation, it's really important to speak to an attorney before doing anything with that, because it could raise a red flag in certain immigration situations if you're trying to get an expungement. And so always recommended, if you have any immigration consequences or an immigration status, that you need to consult with an attorney before seeking any sort of expungement. The effect of an expungement is that the proceedings shall be treated as if they never occurred, and people who receive like an inquiry about this person or a conviction, they can reply that no record exists with respect to that person. So that is the effect of the proceedings. It can be pretty life-changing, you know, in certain situations of trying to get a job, maybe things like that of that nature. You know, if the charge has been a while ago and someone's really cleaned up their life, you know, they might want to get their record expunged for job purposes. There's all sorts of different reasons that a person might want to get an expungement. And so that's kind of the basics of the definition. Now I'm going to go into who is eligible for expungement, right? What types of expungement are there? So there are 4 categories of expungement. There's in New Mexico, and this is all specific to New Mexico, just so that folks know. Different states have different laws. And so this is all very, very specific to our state only. So there's 4 categories of expungement. The first being identity theft. The second is expungement when there's a non-conviction, when there's not a conviction. The third is expungement when there has been a conviction. And the fourth is a new category called automatic expungement for cannabis-related offenses. So that's a long title, but I'll talk about that one. I'll talk about that one last. So the different categories, identity theft, it's pretty straightforward, right? You're a victim of identity theft. You, somebody used your name or likeness or whatever in criminal activity, and it wasn't you, right? So those cases, those identity theft cases, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what's called the waiting period. And that's how long you have before you can request an expungement. So in identity theft cases, there's no waiting period. You can file at any time. So if your identity's been stolen, you can file whenever after that, right? You don't have to wait. The second category is non-conviction cases or no conviction cases, where someone was arrested and they were released without a conviction for certain violations, okay? And it's very specific, the violations in the statute. So it states, you know, violations of municipal ordinance, misdemeanor, felony, penalty assessments under the criminal code or the motor vehicle code, or violations or deferred sentences under the motor vehicle code. So if there was no conviction, and it falls under one of those areas, it has to at least be 1 year since the date of the final disposition in the case. So has to be 1 year from the end of the case, and there can't be any charges against you, any pending charges, proceedings against you anywhere, not just with that case, but there can't be any pending charges or proceedings against you. And so you have to wait for 1 year after the final disposition, and I'll talk about final disposition in a second. So like I said, 1 year. Conviction cases. That is when you were actually convicted or pled guilty to a violation of, like I said, it's stated in the statute, a municipal ordinance, misdemeanor or felony, and you've completed your sentence and the payment of any fines or fees owed to the state for the conviction. So you have to have completed your sentence, and you can't have any outstanding fines and fees, right? Sometimes that'll hang people up because, you know, they might have some sort of restitution or something that was owed, and so all of the fees have to be paid before you can request expungement in a conviction case.
Asia?
Yes, ma'am.
So what about probation? If someone's on probation, is that part of the sentence that needs to be completed prior to qualifying?
So time is measured from the last date from which the person completed their sentence. So I believe that's specific to, I think that might be specific to conviction cases. I'm not sure if that's specific to non-conviction cases, but I know for conviction cases, the time is measured from the completion of the sentence for the conviction. Okay, so if they were on probation, then they would need to complete their sentence. They would need to complete their probation before they, that's when the time starts. And I haven't gotten to the time for the conviction cases yet. But like I said, I will need to look to see if that also applies to the non-conviction cases. Normally, in non-conviction cases, I'm trying to think of a scenario, I guess maybe if there was like a conditional discharge or something, where there was some sort of imposition of a sentence. That's kind of a gray area, but I will need to look at the statute to see if that completion of the sentence also relates to non-conviction cases, but I know it does for conviction cases. And so for conviction cases, there's additional requirements because there is a conviction. It has a few more requirements than the other areas. And so in that case, you'll also have to show that, and I'll talk about the procedure in a minute, but you'll also have to show that there, like I said, there's no other charges pending against you anywhere. You have to show that justice will be served by giving you your expungement. You have to show that you have fulfilled any victim restitution. So that means any money owed to any victims or fines and fees and things like that. And you have to show that you were not convicted of any other crimes during the waiting period. And so the waiting period for conviction cases is very, very specific, depending upon both the type of case and the severity of the conviction. And so the waiting period is going to be longer for more serious types of convictions. So the waiting period is 2 years if the petition, and this is very specific language, and I'm sorry that it's kind of confusing, but it's really important to make sure that you look at what type of conviction it is, because that's going to determine your waiting period. And so 2 years is the waiting period if the conviction is one for violation of a municipal ordinance or a misdemeanor that I don't describe in any of the other categories. So municipal ordinance or a misdemeanor that I don't otherwise describe in these other sections, right? That's 2 years. It's 4 years if the crime was a misdemeanor conviction for aggravated battery. And there's a certain statute that talks about aggravated battery. It's section 30-3-5. You can find that statute in New Mexico One Source, the resource that I spoke about at the beginning. So it's important, if you think that you might have been, if there was violence in the case, or there was some sort of battery in the charge that you pled to, then you need to probably look up the statute to see if you pled guilty to that charge. So it's aggravated battery under that statute, or it's a conviction of a 4th degree felony. Like I said, that's not otherwise in these other categories. So 4th degree felony, aggravated battery under that section 30-3-5. So you have to wait 4 years after the conclusion of the sentence, right? After the probationary period is over. You have to wait 6 years if the petition relates to a conviction for a 3rd degree felony. And so, or another, that's not otherwise described. So there's also, like, if you have a conviction, you can get, and this is going to be necessary for asking for an expungement, you have to get the records that relate to your conviction, right? And so sometimes on your plea paperwork, the paperwork that you fill out when you enter into a conviction, into a plea of guilty, it will say, like, the charges. You can look things up in NM courts or New Mexico case lookup, I'm sorry, to see if you can find out what the charges were, right? Because it's going to be really important to know what you pled to, so that you know what your waiting period is. So again, it's 6 years if it relates to a conviction for a 3rd degree felony that's not in any of these other categories. And then finally, it is, there's 2 more. It's 8 years if it relates to a conviction for a 2nd degree felony, not otherwise described. And then it is 10 years if it relates to a 1st degree felony, or for any offense that's in the Crimes Against Household Members Act, which is also a statute. And I'm sorry that I'm mentioning all these statutes, but like I said, some of this is very detailed. And so it's really important to look up these statutes and see if your conviction might have fallen into one of these categories. And so 10 years if it's a 1st degree felony or any offense provided in the Crimes Against Household Members Act, which is section 30-3-10 through 30-3-18. Okay. So those are the waiting periods. And as I stated, it kind of, as the level of the offense gets higher, the longer the waiting period, right? So that's the conviction category. So far we've done identity theft, no conviction, and then conviction. The last category is the automatic expungement for cannabis related offenses. And that is a newer thing. To be honest, I'm not really an expert on this yet. I think because it's so new, there's a lot of gray areas, but it's if you were charged with a crime or an offense that involves cannabis, that's no longer a crime on the date of the Cannabis Regulation Act. I don't know what that date was. I should know what that date was, but I think it was, I don't even want to guess. I want to say it was sometime this past year, but so you would, and this involves a little bit of research too, right? You have to look up the Cannabis Regulation Act and see if the charge would no longer be a crime. It's mostly going to be like possession type things, like, right? It's not, I think some of the higher level drug crimes are probably not going to fall into this automatic expungement, but you'd have to look at the Cannabis Regulation Act and see if it has been made not a crime anymore. And that was a really progressive thing, I think. We understood that, possession of cannabis, marijuana, is the idea of that is changing all over the nation, all over the world, right? And so decriminalizing that was a very, very important step. And so this is allowing for the automatic expungement of those types of cases. So you can try to get this automatic expungement as long as it has been 2 years since the conviction or the arrest, and the charges have not already been automatically expunged. There's a process for automatic expungement of these charges. And like I said, I'm not really well versed in what that process is, but there in the statute and in the act, there are certain timelines that certain entities have to automatically expunge this. And so if the case has already been automatically expunged, then of course you're not going to have to try and apply for expungement through the court. But if it's been at least 2 years since the conviction or the arrest and they haven't already been expunged, you can do this process through the court to ask for expungement of your cannabis related offense. So that's a lot of information. Those are the 4 categories and the waiting periods, right? I want to go over a few things that are not eligible for expungement. So this expungement only applies to criminal cases only. It doesn't apply to civil cases. So you can't get a civil case expunged. It's for criminal cases only. The other thing that's not eligible is offenses against children, offenses that cause great bodily harm or death to another person, sex offenses as defined in the statute, sex offense statute 2911A-3, embezzlement under that statute, or offenses involving DWI. Those are not eligible for expungement. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about, and you know what, I want to just, now's probably a good time for me to look at the chat.
I was going to say, Asia, let's take a few questions and you can tell us if you want to hold off because you're going to address that later in your presentation. This particular webinar is not posted on the State Bar's website, but we are making a recording today. I neglected to say that early on, and folks can ask for a copy to be sent to you. So one of the questions is, how does the cannabis expungement work for folks still justice involved for cannabis charges?
Let me see.
I think that's where we're talking about if their case has not been completed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, if
time is.
So I would start with the Cannabis Act, and I would look at that and see if it's a charge that is no longer a crime under that act. And if it has been 2 years since that arrest happened, right, then you could go ahead and petition. And so I'll talk about the way that you do that in a second, but I'm
Okay.
hoping that that kind of answers the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the questions is about what is the definition of fines and whether it relates to criminal cases. And when you were talking about that all fines needed to be paid, and someone's asking about owing taxes. Do you know if that comes up?
You know, I don't think it's really come up that much, but I don't want to say definitely no, because I don't know the exact answer, but I would be surprised if they included taxes in that. I think it's more about fines and fees for like the court or like related to the crime, related to the conviction, related to probation, related to those sorts of things. I don't think it's anything related to taxes, which is a completely separate type of law, right? Separate legal area.
Perhaps an exception might be is if a case has been brought related to taxes, but otherwise that makes sense, your response. How do we show restitution payments from 15 years ago?
That's a really good question.
Documentation, yeah.
And kind of difficult. You know, I would say it's gonna probably require a little bit of legwork. I don't know if there's, you know, gathering documents from NM case lookup. If you have any receipts, I know it was 15 years ago, but I find weird things that I've saved from like years and years and years ago every day. But like anything, you know, that you have maybe a receipt, or like if you did it via a money order or a check or something like that, you might be able to, I don't know this, and I think we have somebody from the public defender's office who's an attendee, but I used to work at the public defender's office, and so I don't know if you are represented by them, you know, seeing if they have something that shows that you paid the restitution. It's going to kind of depend on court records too, and if it's a part of that whole court record process, you know, it could involve a little bit of legwork though, you know, and I think going to some of those entities that you might have, you know, paid back then, maybe probation, maybe you had to pay through probation, they might have the information. And so I think just trying to get whatever sort of documentation you can is going to be more helpful than not. Doesn't mean that you can't file for expungement if you don't have it, but I think anything that you can add is going to be helpful. You know, and even, you know, you might even try and get like a letter from, you know, your probation officer or something like that, you know, if they're still around, whatever, saying, oh yes, this person paid this, right? I don't know if they can do that, but you might as well ask. So yeah.
Okay, so we're wanting confirmation that the 4 years for a 4th degree felony starts after completion of the sentence.
Yes. So if it's a conviction case, if there was a conviction in the case, then the time to wait starts after the completion of the sentence. If there was, like I said, I'm not sure about the non-conviction. So if they did not have a conviction, if they're in the non-conviction category, which, like I said, I don't really know what situation that would be. Maybe, like I said, a conditional discharge or something where you would still have some sort of probation or some sort of sentence, even though you didn't have a conviction at all. That's going to be kind of the exception, I think, to the rule. So I'll have to look at that. I'll have to see if for the non-conviction cases, if the period starts after the completion of the sentence. But if there was a conviction, then it starts after the completion of the sentence.
Okay, thank you. So we will get back on the conditional release cases. We'll get back to folks by email with some kind of response on that. One individual is saying, I have someone who has a cannabis felony for trafficking over international borders. Is it capable of being expunged?
I would be shocked if that is eligible, but I would go to the Canada. I said, I'm not an expert in the, I haven't looked at that act with the fine tooth comb. And so I would look and see if it's something that they have said is not a crime anymore. I would be shocked if they said that that's not a crime anymore, because I think it's for lower level possession type cases. It's not necessarily for like high level drug trafficking or like, you know, international mafia type stuff. Those aren't going to be covered by the Cannabis Regulation Act. It's going to be smaller type things. But I think it's really important to also say, like, you know, check the act just to be sure, right?
I think that I'm going to let's take a hold on more questions right now. And let you jump back into it, Asia, and we'll come back to questions a little later.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And some of these, I'm seeing a few of these, and I think that I will cover them in the procedure part of the presentation. So let's see, let's continue. So now I'm going to talk about the process for applying for expungement. And so it's going to differ depending on the type of thing that you need to have expunged. Like I said, there's those 4 categories. And so each category has a different procedure. They're kind of related, but different. I mentioned the Supreme Court rules that came out in the forms. The Supreme Court rule is Rule 1-077.1. That's a really important one. So I'm going to repeat it. It's Rule 1-077.1. And you can get to that at New Mexico OneSource, and you can look it up. And there are forms that have been approved by the Supreme Court, and they're mandatory forms. So you have to use those forms if you're asking for an expungement. Okay, and I will tell you, actually, let's do it right now. I am going to see if I can screen share with you to show you, at least on our 2nd Judicial District Court website, where those are. So let me see, give me a second. Let's share screen. All right, so hoping that you can see this. If you go to nmcourts.gov and put that in your search bar, you will come up with the courts website, and you go to NM Courts right here in the top left-hand corner, and you go down to 2nd Judicial District Court. That's where I work. And we have the forms on our website. So if you go to 2nd Judicial District Court, it'll pull up our 2nd Judicial District Court website. If you scroll down, and you'll see forms on the left-hand side, you can click on that. And then you will see the different types of forms that we have. Expungement's a civil process. Well, it's a criminal process, but it's a civil form. That's very confusing, I know. But you go to civil court forms and procedures to get there. And then you will see the different types of expungement here. And so if I go to expungement conviction, you will see that we have the general information sheet, the steps for filing the expungement petition, and then all of the different forms that you will need. This general information sheet is gold. The steps for filing petition is gold. Those are really, really helpful. Basically, all the information that I'm giving you right now is in those steps, right? So I do highly suggest looking at the forms. You can get them for free on the website here. If you click on them, I don't know if it's gonna do this because it wasn't auto-populating it the last time. Let me see. Let me see if I can do it. Oh, is it showing you that? Okay, so this is like the general information sheet. And this has all the information that I was just telling you all about. Eligibility, all of the things, waiting period to file, right? It's a little more simple than when I was explaining it. And so, so here it all is, the effective expungement. This is just really, really, really helpful. And I'm gonna open I'll open the petition. And so you can see on the website, it's fillable. You have to download it, press that little arrow key and download it and save it. I would do that first. And then I would type into the form. Now, you're still gonna have to print this and sign it. So, so you will still have to print it and sign it because some of these forms have signatures required. But most of it's fillable. Most of the stuff besides the signature part is fillable. Let me stop sharing. You can also get the forms on New Mexico OneSource. And so I think if you go to, trying to think if it's in the 1-00, I'll have to let you know exactly what you type in to get to the forms. I think you have to actually type in the form number, but I can give those to folks if they need that. So that's a really great resource. At our court in the second, we also have expungement packets that you can pick up at our self-help center, which is at 400 Lomas Northwest. And we have a self-help window on the first floor in room 134. You can come into the court and we have them, I believe they are, we're giving them at our self-help window for free during the pandemic. The clerk's office, I think, is charging, but the automatic expungement for cannabis-related offenses is always free. And there's no filing fee for that or anything. For other jurisdictions, I'm not sure if they charge for those or what. And some of this procedural information, it's pretty detailed. It's going to be pretty specific all across the state. But you might, if you're in a different judicial district, like if you're in Santa Fe, or if you're in Las Vegas, or if you're in Las Cruces, you should probably call your court's self-help center or your clerk's office at the beginning of this process if you have any questions about the procedure that I'm about to tell you right now. I'm talking about the procedure in the second. And this is, like I said, it's pretty general over all the jurisdictions, but you should definitely check with your court prior to bringing your forms in, just to make sure that there's not anything that you're missing. And so let me go into the procedure, okay? So for an identity theft case, you're gonna file it's called the petition. That is the document where you're requesting the information, right? You're requesting the expungement. So it's pretty detailed. The petition's probably the longest form that you're gonna fill out. And that's the one that asks the court, hey, I'm asking for this expungement. It's filed in the district court in the county where the charges originated or the arrest occurred or where the conviction was entered. It's very highly preferable to include records with your petition. It's not required, I can't really imagine a situation where you're trying to show the court that your identity has been stolen without any records. And so it's not required through the law, but it is advisable to do that, because I don't know what the court would look at if you didn't have anything showing, hey, this is a booking sheet of this person. Here's what my real picture looks like, right? This is not me. So you may include records, but it's not mandatory, but it's highly suggested. You have to complete what's called a notice of hearing. It's just the caption only. The caption's the part at the top of the paper that says like petitioner, respondent, like the petitioner's the person requesting it. The respondent is the other side, right? I think actually with these cases, there's only a petitioner name because there's no respondent. And so you just have to fill out the notice of hearing, the caption only, you file that with the petition. You don't have to serve anyone. You don't have, for these identity theft cases, you don't have to serve anyone. Serving means you provide a copy to someone. In this case, in the identity theft, you don't have to do that. Normally, these are probably going to be filed or seen without a hearing, but what happens after is there can be objections to the petition filed by like the district attorney's office. If they object or they say, hey, actually, this person is the person who committed these crimes, right? We don't think their identity was stolen at all. They could file an objection to the petition. But if there's no objections, the court can decide it without a hearing. And if there is a hearing set, then the court has 60 days from then to file a written order, either granting or denying the petition. Okay, and then if you do that and the court says no, we are not going to grant you the expungement, you can go to the Court of Appeals. That's the next court that you would go to. For no conviction cases, the petition is filed in the district court where the charges originated or where the arrest occurred. These cases are a little different because they're filed in the law. It says they're filed under seal or pseudonym. I don't know what the pseudonym means, but in the court, you can file things like when things are filed, the clerk's office can seal them, meaning they're not accessible to people, right? And so just the non-conviction cases are filed under seal. And so like say, I don't know, some other person wanted to get the information, they wouldn't be able to. Only the person who's bringing the case is probably going to be able to get that information. For the no conviction cases, you have to include certain records with your petition. You have to include Department of Public Safety records, and they have to be dated no longer than 90 days prior to the filing of the petition. So they can't be old records. They have to be within 90 days of you filing the petition. And the good thing about our forms on our website is they have, it has very specific information about Department of Public Safety. I think it actually even has clickable links to get to the records request area. So definitely take a look at those forms because those links are helpful too. So those DPS, Department of Public Safety records have to be filed with the petition and they have to be within 90 days. You have to do the notice of hearing again, just the caption and file that. And then in these cases, you actually have to serve, like I said, give a copy of your petition to the DA, the district attorney, for the county in which the arrest was made or the criminal charge was filed. And you also have to serve the Department of Public Safety. So the DA, the Department of Public Safety have to be given a copy of your petition of what you're filing, okay? And you have to file what's called a certificate of service. That just shows that that's proof that you served them. You don't have to serve them personally. You can serve, you don't have to like give them a copy, right? Go to their office and hand it to them. You can serve them in the statute, you serve them via first class United States mail. Okay, it's very specific. First class United States mail. So that is how you serve them. And then you're going to file the certificate of service. You don't have to do a separate certificate for each party. You have to do one for the DA and then one for DPS. You can do one certificate of service for both of them, but you have to serve both of them. And then after that, after you file your certificate of service, the DA or Department of Public Safety has 60 days to file either a notice of non-objection or a notice of objection. Like I said, the DA's office or DPS can say, we actually agree with this. We think that this should be expunged. We'll file a non-objection. Or, oh, no. This is way worse than we thought. We're filing an objection, right? If one of those parties does object to the petition, and it's based on like an FBI record that they've pulled, they have to provide you, the petitioner, they have to provide the petitioner with a copy of the FBI rap sheet at no charge, because you need to know why they're objecting. And so they have to provide that to you. So then say the 60 days goes, nothing. 63 days, because that's enough time for them to, I guess, mail something or whatever. 63 days after service of your petition, then then it's your turn again. You file your notice of completion of briefing and your affirmation in support of expungement. And these are two forms that were not required previously in the first iteration. Like I mentioned, that there was the first thing before we got the Supreme Court forms, but you do have to file a notice of completion of briefing and that affirmation and support, or else nothing's gonna happen. So at 63 days after, make sure you file your notice of completion of briefing and your affirmation. And then you also have to serve the parties with both of those things. You have to serve them, like I said, via first class United States mail. So you have to send them copies of those documents. Then they get 20 additional days to object based on any new information that is provided in the affirmation. Basically, the affirmation is you saying, I haven't picked up any new charges since my petition. I'm clean, my record's clean. But if you do say, oh shoot, I did get this other thing that came up, right? Then they have 20 more days to object. So then after the 20 days, if there's no objections to the petition, the court in a non-conviction case may decide the petition without a hearing. They might just say, okay, we're good to go. We're doing the expungement. However, if they decide to have a hearing, they have 60 days from that hearing to file a written order, either granting or denying the petition. And then of course, anything, like if you're contesting it, will go to the Court of Appeals. Let's talk about the conviction process. It is very, very similar to the non-conviction process, except it requires a little bit more. So the petition's filed in the district court where the conviction was entered. You have to include not just the DPS records, Department of Public Safety, but also FBI records with the petition. Those records also must not be more than 90 days prior to the petition. So they have to be new records. So not only DPS, but FBI too. This is if there was a conviction, right? This is the conviction category. Complete the notice of hearing, file that with the petition. And in this category, you have to serve more people. You have to serve the district attorney, you have to serve the Department of Public Safety, and you have to serve the law enforcement agency that arrested you. So there's three entities that you have to serve in this category via first class United States mail. And then it's the same thing. The DPS or the DA or the law enforcement agency have 60 days to file that objection or non-objection. In this case, the court shall hold a hearing, because the other thing that you have to do is you have to show those 4 things: that there are no other charges proceeding or proceedings against you, that justice is going to be served by giving you this order to expunge, that you fulfilled victim restitution, right? And that you were not convicted of any other crimes during the waiting period. And so that's why the court has to hold that hearing, because those 4 things have to be proven before the expungement is allowed. And then, you know, like I said, it's pretty similar to the other category of non-conviction. This one is not under seal. And so if you have, also, this is a little bit detailed, but if you have a case, if you're doing a petition and you're doing both conviction and non-conviction in one petition, it's not going to be sealed if you're doing a conviction in the same petition as the non-conviction, because they're going to defer to the conviction and say, okay, it's not going to be sealed. So that's a very specific situation though. And then, of course, like I said, make sure that you're filing your notice of completion of briefing and your affirmation in support of expungement, because until you file that, there's not going to be anything set, right? So after those 60 days, 63 days, then you file those. And I know I'm short on time here. It looks like we're getting to 4 o'clock. So I'm going to talk about the cannabis related expungement petition. There is a petition for that on the website as well. It's filed in the district court where the charges originated, where the arrest occurred, or where the conviction was entered. The records are not mandatory, but preferable. Like I said, I think that you would have to include something for the judge to look at or to consider. There's no service requirement on any sorts of agencies or anything for that. And the court may set a hearing or may not. If they decide the charges are eligible, they feel like they don't need a hearing, they might just grant it. If they're not eligible, then the petition will be not denied and the case will be closed. And then of course you have to appeal that.
You want to go into some more questions now?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Let's see. One question is a copy of the executive clemency application. They want to know, what is the difference between a clemency and expungement? Can you respond to that?
Ooh, I don't know much about clemency, but I think that's where the governor decides that you are not guilty or something. I don't know much about clemency. I do think it's different. It's definitely different than expungement. Yeah, I'm sorry on that one. I don't know much about clemency, but I think that, and I don't know if you get clemency if your records are automatically expunged, right? I'm sure there could be a situation where maybe the governor gives you that and then, but maybe the record is still there. I don't know, and you're still trying to get the expungement, but I apologize. I don't really know too much about the clemency process. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so one of the questions is, which I see in outreach court all the time, is if someone is not convicted, but still owes fees, do those have to be paid before the expungement?
Let me check on that. If they're not convicted, but they have to pay fines and fees.
Right.
That's kind of similar to the waiting period thing with the probation and stuff. I just need to see if that's for both or if it's just for the conviction only.
Or,
I
okay.
will look.
Let's see. You referenced on the convictions of needing to provide copy of a FBI record or report. How does someone get that?
So that is another thing that is really helpful in our forms that we have on the website. There's also clickable links and information on how to get that as well. Let me see if I can, I'm going to see if I can share my screen again. Hopefully I didn't click out of this. Here we go. Okay, let's see. I think it's going to be on steps to filing. All right, let me try and share real quick. Okay, share. There we go. Let's see. You can see that, right? Let's see if I scroll down. So if you see here, federal arrest record from the FBI. The FBI rap sheet may be obtained directly from the FBI. Here's a clickable link to show how you obtain the FBI rap sheet. And so hopefully this works. Let's see. There we go. It does. Yay. And so this clickable link will take you directly there, and it tells you exactly how to do it here. So those forms are really, really very helpful.
It's one of the things is one of the questions, if someone was attempting to request expungement for 5 trafficking charges, would they need to wait 10 years for all 5 charges to be expunged, or is that 10-year wait for each charged felony? So maybe I can ask this a little differently. So I have multiple cases and they happened over a 2-year period, and I have convictions on all of them. Can I file for expungement all at one time in all 5 cases?
Yeah, I mean, you could. Yeah, I think if they, maybe if it was a plea where you pled to all of them at the same time, because I'm just wondering if the probationary periods are going to be different for those cases.
And so that would necessitate handling them separately if we're talking about different timelines for completion.
You know, you wouldn't, I don't think you would have to tackle them separately, but you would have to finish the probation. You know, you'd have to be at the end of the probation for all of them for the waiting period to start, right? But right. You could do them all in one petition.
One petition. So, and I may have missed this when I was looking at some other things, but what is it cost to file for an expungement?
I believe is it 132 or is it one? Let me see. I actually have that information. It's 132. So for identity theft, non-conviction, no conviction, and conviction, it's $132. That's in our court. That's in the Second Judicial District Court. Might be different in a different jurisdiction. And we do take debit and credit cards now. That's a new thing that just happened. But you can't pay by personal check. You can pay with a money order. If you're unable to pay, we also have, there's an application for free process is what it's called. And that's another form that has been approved. And so you can do the application for free process if you don't have the money to file and request that that fee be taken away or lessened. So yeah, so there's a process for that too. Sorry, my phone is ringing. And that is accessible, that form. I actually, Let me see. We might have that on the website too. Let me just check real quickly.
So it's called the waiver for process fee form?
It's called an it's called an application for free process, an
Application for free
affidavit of
process. Okay.
indigency. Sorry, it's a long title, but it's form 4-222. And what I can do is I can also send you like a sheet with all of the forms and they're like form numbers, so people can look them up in NM courts if they need to. I did not see the application for free process on our website, but
Okay.
it's on OneSource.
So what I'm thinking, Asia, is you've referenced a lot of court rules and as well as statutes and some resource here. And so I'm thinking that we can also maybe list some of those along with the forms that you were just talking about. We can do a follow-up memo for folks on some of the key pieces of info that you've shared here. Although we do want to remind people that they can go to the forms section of District 2's Self-Help Center, and those first two forms are ones that have a lot of the information that you've given out today, correct?
Correct. So yeah, most of the forms can be found on our Second Judicial District Court website. And like I said, really the general instructions and the steps to expungement are really helpful. They're really helpful. They have the clickable links in there. They have all the information about, FBI records, the DPS records. It's very, very helpful. I want to pitch again the teleclinic that's happening on August the 18th. And I know you sent it out in an email to everyone, I think with the actual flyers, but I think maybe I can look back and watch this again and see all of the things that I've promised to people. So I think that's
so
a good
Asia,
one.
can you put up that flyer one more time here before we close out? So I'm going to keep asking you a couple things here while you're doing that, because I know you can multitask. And we are going a little long, so if you could hang with us a couple more minutes, otherwise
let's see,
email us or wait for an email from us, and we'll try and get as many of these questions answered as we can.
Okay, let me see.
So Asia, one of the questions about our community service providers assisting with expungements right now. Can you respond to that?
For folks who are
needing assistance, right?
Who are needing assistance?
In completing the paperwork and or going to a hearing, if that's what manifests in their particular case.
So you're talking about resources for the person who's actually getting the expungement, or for community workers who are helping them?
My understanding is, I think the question is being asked in regards to helping the person who is filing for the expungement. Whether there's anybody in the community doing that outside of like the teleclinic that we're talking about here.
Oh, that's a very good question. I know that outside of the expungement teleclinic, which is specific to expungement, that's up right now, the volunteer attorney program does a monthly teleclinic, and that flyer is on our website also, and it has the dates of the monthly clinics, because some months they actually, I think there's a few months where they're not having the teleclinic, but one of the areas of law is expungement. And so there's also, if somebody can't go to this, there's opportunities through that teleclinic to get assistance. And And that teleclinic's not limited to expungement. This one is on August 18th.
Right.
But the other monthly ones, expungement's one of the areas of law that they will help with. I'm not sure if they're, I know that UNM has done a little bit of
The law school.
assistance with expungement. I think they actually had a clinic
Right.
during the summer. And so I think that they're looking at maybe doing something as well. So yeah.
So I think that from just the little bit of research that I did in planning on this particular webinar is that legal aid, in order to work through to attend a clinic with legal aid, a teleclinic, is that it's going to be income. You have to meet their income guidelines
Yes, very true.
to have access to an attorney. For individuals who fall outside of that, as I understand it right now, the resources are primarily private counsel, which there are a number of private criminal law attorneys in our area, and I'm sure throughout the state, that are assisting people with expungements. And then there's the self-help center at the Second Judicial District, and I'm hoping that that's similar assistance in the other self-help centers in other jurisdictions. But this is an area that is complex, and for people who of limited means, it is complicated. And I know your office would render what assistance it can, but it's short of giving legal advice.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's why this, there's definitely a gap, right? Because you do have to qualify for New Mexico Legal Aid's assistance for the teleclinics. I'm hoping that UNM will do something soon, maybe in the fall. I know that there's been talk about it, and I don't think their clinics are income limited.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I think, and we try and help as much as we can at our self-help center. We're really excited about the forms because it helps us to go through procedure with people. We cannot give them legal advice, right? There are some attorneys in the community who are doing them. I think, I think it's going to be up to the person to determine if they're going to try and do it on their own or if they're going to hire someone. I think if you're talking about some higher level, if you're talking about like, 20 cases or like doing something big like that, right? You got to get documents from, all sorts of different people. Restitution, it depends on the complexity of what you're asking for. But most of it, I think, a lot of it comes down to getting the proof, getting the documents that show what's going on, right? That show most of this. And so sometimes it could be easier to track down those documents. Sometimes it can be difficult to track down those documents. But that's really what the court's going to be looking at, or, what they're going to be basing their determination off of is for identity theft. Have they shown their identity has been stolen, right? For conviction, have they shown that they're not, they don't have any other charges right now? They were done with their probation at this time. They've paid all their fines and fees, all of that. And that can be, sometimes that can be difficult when you're dealing with agencies, right?
Right. Right. So, Asia, I want to say, I think that we're at, I think, like 4:20 or something now, and we probably should wrap this up, but I can't tell you how much we appreciate your sharing this information with us and your commitment to facilitating people's access to the expungement process and generally to judicial resources, and for everyone there, all the participants today in asking your questions and your patience. And we will get back to you with as much information as we can reasonably put together for you. I did learn, I think yesterday, that New Mexico Courts has a YouTube channel. And I believe that there is a video on there about expungements and New Mexico expungements. So that's maybe another resource. But thank you, everyone. And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.